Picture this scenario. You're at the market with your child. You turn around for literally 2 seconds. Maybe you're grabbing your wallet or checking your phone. You look back, and your child's talking to a stranger offering them candy. We've all seen situations like this, right? You'd probably just pull your kid away and have a conversation about stranger awareness. But what if I told you that's exactly how authorities apprehended one of history's most prolific serial offenders? An individual who'd ended over 300 lives. 300. And here's the part that'll seriously mess with your head.
Dije que lo delataba, que él me mataba.
Pero Jorge Patiño, eres tú mismo, decía.
No, padre, yo estoy orando solo que para servirle.
After he confessed to all of it, led authorities to burial sites, provided detailed accounts, they released him after 14 years. He's been missing ever since. Could be deceased.
He's not able of understanding other people's pain or feelings, that what he does is for his own pleasure.
Could be living somewhere undetected. Nobody has any clue. Pedro López. You've probably never heard that name before. Ted Bundy? Sure. Jeffrey Dahmer? Everyone knows him. But Lopez? This individual's confirmed victim count exceeds theirs significantly. We're talking about someone who admitted to ending the lives of over 300 young girls across Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru. And the most shocking aspect? He wasn't apprehended because of sophisticated police work or forensic evidence. Nope. Circumstance. A parent at a market happened to notice at the right moment. That's it. Then, after everything, after confessing, after showing police burial locations, he spent less time incarcerated than it takes most people to pay off a vehicle loan. And then, gone. Disappeared without a trace. Look, I know this sounds like some thriller plot, but it's documented history. And to understand how someone becomes capable of this magnitude of harm, we've got to go back to where it all started, because nobody's born this way. Pedro was born in 1948 in Colombia, the 7th of 13 children. His father was absent, and his mother struggled under extremely harsh conditions just to feed her family. This was poverty in its truest form, the kind where survival itself becomes the only focus. When Pedro was just 8 years old, only a child, his mother caught him in an inappropriate situation with his sister. Rather than seeking guidance or understanding what led to such behavior, she made a devastating choice. She forced him out of the home. An 8-year-old child, suddenly abandoned, left to face the streets alone. So now there he was, young, frightened, and without any means to survive. An adult soon approached him, offering food and shelter. At first, it seemed like help, but that person took advantage of him, inflicting harm until Pedro finally managed to run away. Think about that for a moment. Every adult who should have protected him either turned away or caused him pain. That kind of betrayal and trauma at such an early age leaves permanent scars. It changes how a child's mind develops and how they see the world. He survived on the streets for years, doing whatever he could, begging, stealing, struggling to make it through each day. Then, when he was 12, an American family took him in and enrolled him in a school for displaced children. For a brief time, it seemed like hope had returned, but that too ended in betrayal. Someone at the institution harmed him again. Pedro fled after stealing money, returning to a life on the run. By his teenage years, he had learned one harsh truth: trust no one. In his eyes, the world was predatory, and survival meant never allowing himself to be vulnerable again. At 18, Lopez gets arrested for auto theft, 7-year sentence, and incarceration? That's where things went from bad to absolutely catastrophic. He claims that 4 inmates seriously assaulted him, and his response? He didn't report it through official channels. He didn't seek protection. He created a makeshift weapon and ended their lives, one by one, over several weeks. That's not some heat-of-the-moment reaction. That's cold, calculated retaliation. When he got out in 1978, Something had fundamentally fractured in him. Or maybe it had been fractured all along, and incarceration just unleashed it. Either way, he'd discovered he felt empowered by ending lives. More than that, he'd identified exactly what type of victims he wanted. Young girls, preteens, from poor indigenous families. He stated, and this is going to disturb you, that they were the most innocent and trusting. Like that was his selection criteria. Here's what's so troubling about his method. It wasn't random violence. He planned meticulously. He'd spend time gaining their trust, sometimes hours or days. Then he would end their lives at sunset. Always at sunset. He said he wanted specific conditions while there was still daylight. That level of ritual, that much control, that's what separates serial offenders who get caught quickly from ones who don't. Lopez knew exactly what he was doing. Real quick before we get into how this escalated. If you're into true crime and want to understand the psychology behind these cases, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We do deep dives like this every week, going way beyond the surface level stuff you see everywhere else. Alright, let's talk about how Lopez became basically undetectable. Between 1978 and 1980, Lopez just moved around. Peru, Colombia, Ecuador. Borders didn't matter to him. And his targets? Always the same. Disadvantaged girls from indigenous communities. Children whose families didn't have the resources to search for them. Children whose disappearances often weren't even reported. In Peru alone, he confessed to over 100 incidents. Do the math on that. That's multiple offenses every single week. But then he made a mistake. Tribal villagers caught him attempting to abduct a 9-year-old girl. And here's where it gets wild. They were prepared to administer immediate justice. They'd already made preparations. But this American missionary convinced them to hand him over to the police instead. You'd think that's where the story ends, right? Serial offender caught, justice served? Nope. The authorities just deported him back to Colombia. No investigation. No charges. They literally released one of history's most prolific serial offenders back into society because they couldn't be bothered. So Lopez continues. Colombia, then Ecuador. Same pattern. He'd position himself around markets, bus stations, anywhere children were present. He'd offer candy or toys. Once he gained their trust, he'd take them somewhere isolated. His method was consistent, always at sunset. And then, this adds another whole layer of horror, he'd keep the bodies, return to visit them. We're talking about post-mortem violations on top of everything else. April 1980. There's this massive flash flood near Ambato in Ecuador. When the water recedes, it's exposed to these shallow burial sites. Bodies of young girls everywhere. At first, authorities think it's some kind of mass disaster, but then they realize these girls were taken deliberately. The investigation starts, but honestly, it's circumstance that catches him. That same month, Lopez tries to take a 12-year-old girl named Maria from a marketplace. Except this time, her mother notices at exactly the right moment. She calls out, people pursue him, and the crowd apprehends him before he can escape. At first, he maintains innocence. Wrong person, I didn't do anything. But then they bring in this priest, Father Cordova Gudino, to speak with him. And after hours of conversation, Lopez just starts talking. And once he starts, he can't stop. He confesses to 110 incidents in Ecuador, over 100 in Colombia, more than 100 in Peru. He takes police to burial sites all over Ecuador, body after body, exactly where he said they'd be. But here's what really strikes me. He showed zero remorse. None. He's sitting there, calm as anything, almost proud. He actually told investigators he was doing these girls a favor by ending their lives before they had to experience poverty. Like he was some kind of savior. The delusion is extraordinary. 1983. Lopez gets convicted. Multiple charges, Open and shut case, right? Here's the problem. Ecuador had abolished capital punishment, and their maximum prison sentence, 16 years. That's it, for over 300 confirmed incidents. 16 years. But wait, it gets worse. Ecuadorian law gave time off for good behavior. And Lopez? Model inmate. Quiet, polite, followed all the rules. So in 1994, after just 14 years, they declared him rehabilitated and released him. I need you to really process that. An individual who confessed to ending over 300 children's lives walked out of prison after 14 years because he was well behaved. How does that even happen? Colombia immediately issued an international warrant. He gets rearrested, extradited, tried for another case. 20 more years. But then, in 1998, someone determines he's mentally unfit and transfers him to a psychiatric facility. Then, and this is where it becomes surreal, somewhere between 1999 and 2002, they release him from the facility. Why? Officially, because he'd been reassessed. Unofficially, the facility needed space. They needed beds. After that, nothing. Absolutely nothing. No sightings, no arrests, no record of death. Pedro López just disappeared. This is the part that keeps me up at night. If he's alive, Lopez would be in his mid-70s right now. There were rumors in 2002 that he'd been arrested again in Colombia, but nobody's ever confirmed that. Some people claim he passed away in a hospital in 1998, but there's no death certificate. No proof whatsoever. Interpol had his case open for years. True crime investigators have tried tracking him down, but you've got to understand. Colombia and Ecuador in the late 90s and early 2000s were dealing with cartel violence, political instability, chaos. A released serial offender just wasn't anyone's priority, as troubling as that sounds. Most likely, he's deceased. I mean, he'd be quite elderly now, and given the kind of life he lived, odds are he passed years ago. Maybe homeless, maybe targeted by someone who figured out who he was. But there's this other possibility that's absolutely terrifying. What if he's not gone? What if he resumed his activities and just got better at concealment? What if he's out there right now, some quiet elderly man that nobody would ever suspect? We'll probably never know. And honestly, that might be the most disturbing aspect of this whole story. Look, understanding how Pedro López became who he was, it's not about excusing it. It's about recognizing how early trauma can profoundly alter a person's psychological development. Think about his life. Abused at 8, abandoned by his own mother, exploited again at 12, attacked in prison. Every time he placed his trust in someone, that trust was shattered. Experiences like that don't just leave emotional scars. They completely reshape how a person perceives the world and other human beings. His victims weren't chosen at random. Young girls symbolize the innocence he'd lost. By exerting control over them, by ending their lives, he was attempting to reclaim the power that had once been taken from him. When he said he was saving them from suffering, that was classic psychological projection. In truth, he was trying, again and again, to symbolically save the child version of himself. The ritualistic aspects, always at sunset, always using the same approach, were about control. His childhood had been filled with chaos and fear. These rituals gave him a sense of order, predictability, and dominance, things he never had as a child. But here's what's truly chilling about Lopez. He was functional. He could blend in anywhere, travel freely, and hold normal conversations. He didn't appear unstable or erratic. He was patient, strategic, and disturbingly ordinary. And that's exactly what made him so dangerous. The Pedro López case forces us to ask some really uncomfortable questions. How do we prevent such individuals from being created in the first place? What happens when justice systems aren't equipped to handle crimes on this scale? How do we protect the most vulnerable people when institutions keep failing them? There's no satisfying resolution here. No closure for hundreds of families who still don't know what happened to their daughters. No dramatic courtroom justice, just a person who walked out of prison and vanished. Maybe he's deceased. Maybe he's alive somewhere, and his neighbors have no idea who lives nearby. We'll probably never know. And that uncertainty, that lack of closure, that's almost worse than knowing. Thanks for watching. If you're interested in more cases like this, check out the other videos on the channel. And remember, understanding these cases isn't the same as excusing them. It's about learning to recognize warning signs, prevent future tragedies, and protect the people who can't protect themselves.